welcome back everyone. This is Mr. Cat-Eye. Now today I'm going to be picking up with the activities of what's going on in Central America, Latin America, with regard to Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Mexico, and other nations that are part of the Central American corridor. Now, back in July of 2015, if not sooner in the year, I started monitoring Jade Helm like many others. And I contributed in many ways with regard to at least showing the code, but it was the physical location of the 5 Walmart stores that were closed all of a sudden, with a 5-hour notice being given for the layoff of approximately 500 employees. We were told in the media that they were shutting down these Walmarts for plumbing repairs. Now, Jade Helm, of course, was a big thing. Walmart, many people knew and suspected at least that it was somehow related, but it wouldn't be until I showed that the Walmart logo, and that's right, I'm the guy that came up with the observation that the Walmart logo, 6 points, sunburst, is in fact the Star of David, Seal of Solomon. And of course, back in 2015, I would immediately have thought of Israel as a result of seeing this image. But these days, I see it as part of a secret science, a secret technology, of which Israel is in possession of. Now, Jade Helm, their logo with a dagger and 2 arrows, was also a 6-pointed element. Symbolically, I saw it as Walmart, 6 points, Jade Helm, 6 points, Star of David, 6 points, 666. And while I found this observation way back then, I didn't understand it the way I do these days, but it was still a valid observation that's still valid to this date. Now, in addition, I did other things, looking within the Seal of Solomon, the Star of David, and saw that there was inherently within this image triangle pointed upwards, fire sign, which would be the tip of a spear and or the tip of a trident, a 3-pointed weapon. Now, all I did was merely identify the 5 store locations, noted them on a national map, and realized that from east coast to west coast, it formed what would be termed, for more appropriate terms, a theater of operations. This is the type of layout that you would see at a very strategic, large-scale level of planning, far removed from, as you'll get to see, because each of these 5 locations is in and of itself a major chapter with regard to what's there, how it serves geographically, with road networks, military-industrial complex, and city populations, things of that nature. And because it spans from the west coast to the east coast, by the time you get to Florida, you see all of this is predicated on the idea back then, the way I saw this as an invasion. It was an invasion from Latin American countries. Now, this was long before realizing that Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua formed the trifecta of tyranny, dictatorships that could have very well planned an invasion along with other nation states, because they seek to have a geographical, geopolitical influence over this region. And the Central American, South American nation states believe themselves to be a force. And so one of the many areas of discussion with that regard of expansionism would be Aztlan, which is really the recovery and the taking back of certain American states for the sake of Mexico or some Latin American group who wants to do this. Now, it's not taking all of America. It's just taking everything from Texas all the way to California. Now, these Aztlan states so happened to match up with the Jade Helm map that showed Texas to be hostile. And so this was one of those Jade Helm and other topics that people saw but didn't quite understand. And you would only understand it if you understood that Obama, by the time of Jade Helm, had already normalized relations with Cuba, Raul Castro, and that was in 2014. And so by 2015, when Obama visited Cuba and Raul Castro, the planning was already underway with regard to, you see, a plan has to be shared among the participants in order for the participants to know and plan for what their part of the pie is. For instance, everything that's going on in Florida is so far removed, separate, and different from what's going on in California that you can't see each and every location the same way. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But okay, Walmart was a key player. I showed the code and other code that justified the fact that I was observing properly and that my thinking that this was a three-pronged attack. A left, a center, and a right was identified from me way back in the day. Now, the fact that Eagle Pass has come into consideration, I'm going to show the code in Eagle Pass and offer a discussion, because once again it puts Texas into the heart of this discussion as part of the Jade Helm invasion plan. It updates the invasion plan with things that are ongoing today, and so this is just background to allow you to understand that, so that you know who's who. Obama's president. Brennan, at this time frame during Jade Helm, is the director of the CIA. During all of this coordination and normalization with Cuba, these two players were involved. And so any plan to allow an invasion, you see, when we saw all of our troops and everything doing what they were doing, most would never know that they were doing what they were doing so they could be assessed from the enemy's perspective as to what they would need to then do to defeat us. And because it's not about a war where they plan on invading and conquering all of the United States of America. Now, this is regional, very geopolitical, with some goals in mind. And because these goals are very specific to certain groups, those are the groups that I believe Obama and the deep state elements would have worked with in order to bring this plan about. But to bring this plan about, they would have had to have coordinated with Cuba, perhaps with Venezuela, Nicaragua, Mexico. You never know, because Mexico is a big key to this. Now, what's also key is that when the immigration issues began, Tijuana began it in the media. Well, this is, in fact, the left sector, although this is Pico Rivera, California, up near the bays, the terminals. There's also a lot going on there, but I'll get to it as I move around from the Florida all the way to each of these, because I'm going to discuss some of the various elements that are different at each and every one of them that you would need to consider in order to understand that this three-pronged attack is a theater of operations needed to be coordinated, structured, and organized to allow certain nation states to work them. Now, what nation states working together? You would have to think that Florida would be a project of Cuba because they're so close by. But then if you get into wargaming, the different scenarios, you would have to realize that they just couldn't move on Florida and Tampa Bay, home to Special Operations Command. You just couldn't move on that without everything else being kicked off at pretty much the same time. So there has to be a timing. Well, first there has to be a preparation. Then there has to be a planning, preparation, and then some form of testing the system, to then set some date by which all of them are on the same sheet of music. So when that date and time comes, they act. Each and every Walmart closure location is different, has different things to consider. And so I'm going to discuss them just matter-of-factly from the way I see things. And if you gain anything from it, that's the intent. That's why I want to discuss it. So with that in mind, let's go take a look at Florida. Okay, the interesting thing with regard to Tampa, Florida, is that Florida would have to be a consideration of Cuba. Now, we're not talking some ragtag mercenary army. We would have to be talking a considerable amount of troops, professionals, armed, and so instructed like professional soldiers in what to do effectively and proficiently each and every time. Now, such a special operations group acting on Special Operations Command, because at Tampa, aside from MacDill Air Force Base, you have the United States Special Operations Command, which is very key to many things going on these days on the global stage. The fact that there's a bay allows for an entry point, but the fact that there's also an Air Force Base and Special Operations Command makes this Brandon Walmart location significant. Now, Brandon is marked in yellow, and I did this for the following reason. I wanted to show that, you see, when you think at this level, Brandon merely serves as like a generalized marker for something that can be seen immediately in the area. And immediately when I did this map study and realized where Brandon is and what it represents on this larger scale, because you do have to back away from being too close. Because if you start looking at Brandon, what street, what building, is there some clue? No, you got to back out, because at the strategic level of planning, you have to see a much bigger picture. And Brandon serves as a generalized marker for this Tampa Bay, MacDill Air Force Base, Special Operations Command, and a road network system that would control, under a time of control, north-south and east-west mobility. Now, the idea wouldn't be to conquer, to start invading into America. It would be to control various elements of the United States, such as Florida, which is why the invasion map showed the shoreline, the coastline primarily, leading into, Louisiana and eventually into Texas. But once again, Cuban forces, perhaps in combination with other forces, would have to be so trained in order to be able to conduct this operation. And if you war game this, like I hope you will, you'll realize, okay, well, could they use well, you see, there's all types of scenarios. But in this type of scenario, if you wish to acquire it and to gain some intelligence from it, then you have to do so without destroying it. Now, how you kill the people is one thing, but if you leave everything else intact, this is where you get into neutron bombs, various biological and chemical weapons that could be delivered not only by submarine, but by Cuba's ICBMs and missiles that can go all the way as far as Washington State. So they have the ability to strike us much quicker than any other nation state, socialist or otherwise, because they have the weapons that Russia has provided them. Cuba, Russia, a key thing together. And therefore, Cuban and Russian forces, I could see, in doing this operation. And this is just a single point, a single city, a single Walmart. And the significance of this is seen when you understand the close proximity to Cuba, when you understand the significance of the geographic layout and what's here, and when you realize the bigger picture that you see, for instance, one scenario, if you could bring in your invading forces and land them so that they deploy from the airfield and begin going to and securing those vital checkpoints that will become necessary to be in control. Now, obviously, any move on Special Operations Command and even MacDill Air Force Base, from a security perspective, once anything is when, depending on how they would act on these targets, would determine, what I'm saying is I'm certain there would be any number of different security alarms and 911s going off at various levels of defense with regard to what would be going on here if in fact they were being invaded, being attacked in some large-scale fashion by an invading army. Now, the airfields are key. If you can protect them, then you can use them. The enemy can use them, coming and going. That would be one type of an operation, perhaps in combination with submarines and other landing forces necessary to acquire what they would need to acquire. Because, see, once they gain certain control over certain leaders, certain critical locations, then, depending on how they would do it at God forbid, but you never know, some spokesperson might come forth and say, surrender for the safety and well-being of not only, all military, but their dependents and everyone so involved. Because once again, this is an Air Force base, Special Operations Command, all types of dependents and civilian entities here as part of what's there. And so it becomes a big piece of the puzzle when you start thinking in wargaming. But the airfield serves as a very strategic and tactical element to be aware of. Special Operations Command, what could you learn if you could take them out and be in control and to acquire their secrets? What would you learn? And once, if in fact they could make it this far, and I'm talking hypothetically, obviously, because like I said, it wouldn't be some ragtag mercenary army. This would have to be a professional job. And a dual nation, Cuba and Russia, would fit that bill, because they would have the planes necessary and the airborne strike force troops to be able to bring them in large numbers and to be able to offload and then begin the invasion. But this part of any invasion would once again have to be timed to other things within this large theater of operations that's going to lead all the way to the Pacific coast, Pico Rivera, California, because there at Long Beach they got the terminals. And, I'm going to, like I said, discuss each and every one of them. This, for me, is what I wanted to discuss primarily with what is at Brandon, and to realize that Brandon merely serves as a generalized location of a significant area. And once you see the significance of what's in the area, you understand why Brandon would have been marked. But the Walmarts represent something else, because those Walmarts, aside from being storage, they could be warehousing, everything needed for an invading army, which is the other thing interesting that came to mind here just in the last few days, is that they could sneak in anti-aircraft weapons and set them up to be able to use against our own U.S. Air Force from within Florida. Now, that would be a twist on things because of how it would disrupt so many things, to include perhaps international travel coming in and out of Miami. But anyway, okay, this is what I wanted to say with regard to Florida, how Cuba would have to be the big player in this operation involving Tampa, along with perhaps other nation states. But I wanted to show this so that you see what's at stake here. Okay, so what? There's a Walmart at Brandon that got closed down. So what? Well, if it's part of this invasion plan that I saw as a theater of operations, then this is why it's on the map, because it's significant to the enemy. That is what's foremost. So let's move on to Texas. Okay, Livingston, Texas. Another Walmart closure. Now, specifically, this Texas location, as you can see from the close-up, the only things that one would notice if you looked closely is that there's a large body reservoir of water, a lake, to the west of Livingston. Livingston is itself located within a major road network system that would be key for control, not for this spot, but for things coming from other locations, being able to move, bypassing major other routes that would be different from secondary roads and types of highway systems. But okay, Livingston, Texas. All I can say is I've even done closer map studies of Livingston. The key thing in each and every spot, to include Tampa, is that there could be an element of military-industrial complex businesses that work or are located within these given areas, and that in itself would be a study that somebody would have to do, because I'm certain, much like with Pico Rivera in California, and just like with Tampa with Special Operations Command, there are key things that are going to be found once you begin looking. And so what I'm trying to say is that there could be a military-industrial complex element within each of these locations. You just never know. But okay, this is Livingston, Texas. Let me show you Tulsa, Oklahoma. Okay, this is Tulsa, Oklahoma, the tip of the spear, the tip or the furthest point of the attack or the invasion. Now, I would point out with Tulsa, just like with the others, there could be some military-industrial complex activities within this area. That would be a different type of study and report. But aside from the road networks, now the road networks are key to all of these locations, so I can't, stress enough, if you're going to do your own independent map study, you pay attention to the road networks and you think about what would happen if people couldn't use them. Complete control of mobility, coming and going to those things that you might want to go do or come from. And so once the mobility gets restricted, once 18-wheelers or vehicles start getting blown out of the roads with tanks, because you see, police and special operations police units aren't going to be able to deal with tanks who can nail you at 2 miles. A tank can hit you at 2 miles. From the time the round is fired, in that 1 second, it will travel 2 miles. You're dead. Now, there's no squad car or no special ops vehicle that's going to be safe from tank rounds. And that's what I believe is eventually this will be some type of conventional tank war, holding strategic areas of ground necessary to conduct those type of operations. And the only reason such operations would even be allowed to exist is because I believe in such a scenario, many cities, many people, millions of people would be held hostage. Entire regions of certain states would be held hostage, which would be a negotiating and a chip in a larger game of the deep state versus whomever. But Tulsa, Oklahoma, the tip of the spear, and I would tell you because I used to be assigned there. In Kansas, you've got Fort Riley, Kansas, home of the Big Red One, 1st Infantry Division. Well, once you realize where it's at, and you start looking at the highway systems, you realize that Tulsa, Oklahoma serves as a strategic far enough back point to be able to, if so desired, to impede any north-south travel of those type of troops from this vicinity. And the fact that it stopped here where it did, I believe is once again intentional because of the road network systems and highway systems that are here. So let's move on to Midland, Texas. Okay, moving right along. Midland, Texas. Once again, there's nothing really outstanding with regard to Midland other than it's noted, it's observed to be, once again, a intersection, a node of major roads. But I'm certain if you controlled this particular spot, you could then control mobility in many directions. But it's about the road network system. Now, there could be dumb underground military bases or military industrial facilities, manufacturing sites within these given locations. But like I said, I don't really know for certain. I'm really going through the cities where these Walmart stores were closed because, like I stated, their closure could then allow them to be used for storage facilities, logistics positioning of ammunition and or many things necessary to conduct a small-scale regional conventional type of warfare to resupply elements. But okay, Midland, Texas. this is what I wanted to show. Let's move on to Pico Rivera, California. Pico Rivera, California. Once again, the Walmart store closure might seem completely, what's it all about? But when you get to looking at the area, you would have to come to realize that, first of all, at Long Beach, you've got the terminal, major terminal, port of entry. And so, of course, once again, you wouldn't want to destroy it in terms of the infrastructure, but you would want to save it in order to be able to use it. Now, the fact that Pico Rivera, where located, once again, in my opinion, denotes the road network system that takes you over the mountains, kind of a north-south approach. But once again, it's key because it marks an area. Now, this entire area could very well be ground zero for something necessary to acquire the port and not have any problems with the people. Once again, specialized weapons, neutron bombs, biological, chemical would have to come into play before I would consider nuclear strikes from submarines or ICBMs. Like I said, they would want to protect the infrastructure in order to be able to use it, to be able to bring in more. But this would be, of all of the five, this one becomes a China element. Now, I'm going to get into Eagle Pass, and Eagle Pass, I believe, is going to be associated with a China element. But you just need to see that, I'm just thinking, from Pico Rivera, California, I can't envision Russian troops, Cuban troops, I would presume Chinese, or maybe even North Korean, long before I would ever consider Russian or Cuban. So, but anyway, Pico Rivera was so highlighted. I would tell you, as part of the military-industrial complex at this area right here specifically, is where the B-2 bomber, all the components are manufactured, and where the B-2 bombers are made. So is it important? Just from that very small perspective, but that wouldn't be the single, reason. These locations are very theater strategic. So they have multiple roles. One of them would be the port of entry. Secondary would be a major population of citizens that could either be eliminated or could be used as some form of leverage if you were to be able to get in this area and control the government. Because you see, once an invasion takes place of the kind that I believe they've envisioned here, made plans for, it's a kind of an invasion where the military invading forces would get with our local leaders like the mayor or the governor and would more or less ask for us to cooperate. Otherwise, we will be executed on the spot. Curfews would be in place, mobility would be restricted, certain things would not be allowed any longer. And so anyone resisting or found after curfew, being shot, executed on the spot, will be a deterrence for some. But for many, it'll just be the game. But make no doubt about it, in this day and age of digital technology, drones, the ability to see in the dark, if you think, you're going to be all Rambo and sneak around, no, you better think it again, because that's not going to work. Not in this day and age. But anyway, Pico Rivera, California, these are the 5 Walmart store closures that for me created the markings of a theater of operations that to me showed me an invasion plan, a left, a center, and a right. Now, Eagle Pass has come up in a recent observation, and I would tell you that when Trump recently visited El Paso, I was concerned because you see El Paso, although I didn't mark it here on this map, is where the ISIS camp on the Mexican side was located. Now, El Paso serves as once again, a key spot because of the road network systems that take it north that would allow it to go all the way to Colorado. Now, during many exercises post-Jade Helm, these fast mobile units, strike forces, were used to do operations in this area. And once again, I believe it was an operation merely because, you see, we're going to find ourselves not being able to stop the invasion. The most we're going to be able to do is control specific areas of terrain and then probe to try to work. Because you see, at some point, there's going to have to be some objective. I mean, how are you going to win the peace? You're going to have to defeat the enemy. If the enemy is a combination, multitask force of Cubans, Russian, Chinese, North Korean, who knows? The spectrum of soldiers from Latin America, you just never know. But such an invading army, the more advanced nation states with airborne troops and air assets, to include howitzers, artillery, rockets, things of that nature, advanced technologies, are the ones that would be most formidable. But Eagle Pass, just so that you, once again, of all the 5, this for me would be a Pico Rivera, would be a Chinese target, a Chinese area of interest, as opposed to these others. But China and Eagle Pass, I believe, are going to be related, because once again, the road network systems from Mexico coming into the United States it's about the roads. Now, this particular road coming into Eagle Pass from Mexico comes from across the mountains and takes you a very specific location. Now, this location, once again, is a major hub. Depending on where they would land forces and marshal them, they would have to bring them over the mountains. Now, at one time, because there's another road here that takes you to Nuevo Laredo, but I believe because of Eagle Pass is a major point of entry for immigrants coming into America. It's structured, it's built up, and it's built up in such a way to support heavy traffic of, well, such things as tanks. 60 tons per tank can be pretty massive. So you would need, well, this is why I believe Eagle Pass is part of this picture. Because although the idle markers and the point have been identified within the area of operations, within this Texas area from Mexico, Eagle Pass serves as the entry point because of the road network system. Because I've studied this going across the mountains, once again, as I envisioned way back in the day during Jade Helm, depending on where Chinese forces would land, would determine the road network systems that would bring them across the mountains and into the United States. But like I said back then, staging their movement, their arriving and their offloading and their staging and then their movement towards the United States would all be monitored under satellites. So once again, if they've trained and planned to do so, to land, offload, and move on Invasion USA within a given time frame, it's going to have to be a real rapid pace. I'm just saying it would have to be an operation that would be fast, because any delay, with your troops out in the open, massed, they're subject to being annihilated. But anyway, Pico Rivera, of the 5, like I said, is the only one that I believe caters to China. And the west coast of Baja California is what I believe where these Chinese forces would land, necessary to then move across the mountains and come in through various entry points. Not only along the coast, because Houston is in itself a major port city, but there are also problems because they're so built up. So for most major cities, you tend to go around them. And if you do more map studies on all of these, you'll see that at some point that going around major cities these locations are there by design, by intent. And so let's get into Eagle Pass. Okay, here we go. Eagle Pass. Eagle Pass, of course, is a major entry point from Mexico into the United States of America. There are others in Nuevo Laredo, but for the sake of discussion and for the sake of a plan that's not quite as clear and simple as some would perceive it, too many of you think that a straight line between point A and point B is the quickest way to get there. But that's not always the case in a type of military operation, an incursion, an invasion. You need certain points of entry if you're going to accommodate specific types of vehicles or a specific number of people. And also the geographics could offer a form of shielding, strategic importance. There's a lot of things that a location can be defined or used for, but Eagle Pass is coded. Eagle is 5 letters, Pass is 4 letters. Well, here's 9. Now this code, we've seen it before, and I'm going to reference it for those of you that may not know or didn't watch that far back. It really isn't that far back, but it is at the end of 2018's video reports. That is with regard to the 12-1 finding. 12-1. 12-1 was supposed to be a date of something happening, and it was associated with the AMLO, the president of Mexico, being sworn in on that specific date. There were many things going on in and around that date. That date came and went. Of course, it was the death of George Herbert Walker Bush Sr. on 11/30, combined with the Alaskan earthquake that was 7.0 on 11/30. And the fact that that date of 11/30 set us up for a 15-day coding that would lead us to 12/15, the date of the infamous bare-breasted, red-robed Mariannes in Paris, France, as part of the Yellow Vest protests, which are still going on to this date. Now, Eagle Pass. Eagle Pass is coded in that, well, aside from the 5-4, which creates the 9, once I applied alphanumerics to all of the letters, a simple reduction, I end up getting Eagle produces a 12, and Pass produces a 10, which becomes a 1. 12-1. Now, for me, seeing this 12-1 and knowing that there's a 9 involved, I merely took the 9 and the 12-1, which is 13. 9 and 13 creates 22. Well, 22 is specific to Donald Trump. Now, we've even seen images of him with his head surrounded by the wings of an eagle. The eagle picture where he looks like Mercury. Okay, but anyway, Eagle Pass. Now, I point this out, and this is about as much as I'm going to discuss code-wise, because the rest of the discussion is more strategic and part of the plan, okay, which is what needs to be further expanded upon. Now, I've touched upon Tampa and Brandon, Florida, Livingston, Texas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Midland, Texas, and Pico Rivera, California, each of which has their own specific, identities of what would be important to them in their geographic locations. Aside from all the military, industrial, perhaps secret, dumb underground military bases, secret prepositioning of logistics and supplies for things that have yet to occur, don't know. But Eagle Pass brought something to me in terms of a thought process that I'm getting ready to share. And I had to show you all this background because in order to share what I'm getting ready to share with regard to Eagle Pass and the existing Jade Helm invasion plan based on the location of these 5 Walmart closures, because that's how it was derived. I just didn't draw lines and say, oh, here's an invasion plan. No. I take what I do a little more seriously than some of you give me credit for, but that's okay. Listen up. For those of you military veterans and for those of you preppers, okay, well, you're going to hear me say some things maybe some of you don't like, but that's beside the point, okay? I base my opinions on a history, a tried and true history, not a maybe it'll work. I hope it works. It could work. No. I've lived a life that allows me to know certain things of a certain certainty. And so all I'm going to do is merely share a discussion with regard to Eagle Pass, its location, and how its location, the fact that it is an entry point into the United States of America from Mexico, of which there is an existing road network system at Eagle Pass on both the U.S. and the Mexican side that would be key to this understanding of this invasion coming into the heart and central area of Texas, leading and pushing all the way up to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, as I stated, Tulsa, Oklahoma is the point of the spear. It took me a while to process all this because when I came across Eagle Pass, I didn't know what to think of it until I started processing it from the invasion perspective. Yeah, it has to be considered from an invasion perspective, and a perspective of an invasion that has been coordinated and planned with certain nation states to do all their parts relative to the left side, the center, and the right. Now, the right, Tampa and Florida, like I said, is a most suitable candidate for Cuba. Okay, all the way into Texas, you could have Cuba and Russian forces that would be the key elements by which to conduct the invasion from the Atlantic Gulf Coast side. Now, I'm not excluding Red Dawn airborne soldiers. Those are still would have to be in play, but in a whole different way from the Hollywood version. Now, okay, this invasion plan. When I looked at Eagle Pass and realized what's going on here, and I realized that there is code for me to substantiate the suggestion, therefore it allows me to have this discussion. The code for me says it all. This 12-1 means it was part of that original plan, the original invasion plan to invade America on a given date that didn't occur. When those plans were modified and changed, as they were, on 12-1, like I said, it didn't mean that they threw these plans out with the baby. Okay, they didn't do that. They've merely been modified because every one of these locations would have required intelligence, reconnaissance, knowledge that would be applicable to each and every one of their specific locations because they're separate and unique in and of themselves, such as Tampa, Florida, with the United States Special Operations Command, and the fact that it's a bay, and the fact that it's MacDill Air Force Base, and the fact that it's a major entry point into Florida Central in order for whomever to be able to control mobility north and south. And so Florida would be, well, a problem to those living in Florida. So if you're living in the Brandon, Tampa area, your considerations for this discussion have to be applied strictly to Tampa. But you would need to know that it's part of an operation that spreads across the United States. Because when the crap hits the fan, okay, like I said, they can't do Tampa and Special Operations Command on its own. It would all have to be coordinated at a time where all of them are in play at the same time in order to create the knee-jerk response that I believe they're hoping to get from the United States, the military, and our systems and ability to respond. And our biggest difficulty in such a scenario is that, like I said, they're not looking to, I believe, destroy everything or everyone. The people will become the means by which to have leverage over those people that in government, our government, seek to bring an end or a peaceful conclusion to what's going on. Because people are going to die. There's no way around it. People are going to get killed in defense of the United States of America, and people are going to get killed in the invasion process of the invaders dying. And so, either way, this discussion is to help you, based on where you are within this area, you would have to then apply what you know and what's been said to your current situation. Because in the game of survival, it ultimately always comes down to what you yourself have to deal with when you have to deal with it. And I can't think, there's so many infinite possibilities of what could happen in your specific area. That's why it's important for me to just cover the bigger picture. Now, with this out of the way, I wanted to show Eagle Pass. It's a major entry point for immigrants from Mexico. There are major bridges here, more than one point. It's ideal not only because of the infrastructure, but also because of the road network systems on the U.S. side and on the Mexico side. And when you study these road network systems on the Mexico side, you should follow them. You should follow the roads to where they go and where do they lead. Because you see, the same in Texas, where roads exist, they're going to be used for fast mobility and transport of whatever's coming in. So acquiring them and controlling them is going to be key to the invading army. Now, that you have to understand. And so, with that in mind, and the code shown, let's get into the final chart. Okay, as with everything, it's not always as simple as it looks. For everything, for each and every location on this invasion map, every location is separate and unique, has different planning and or response considerations. So depending on where you are, you would have to apply your area, what you know, and or what you think you're going to do to a given area. But understand something. You've got to understand that this is the type of deep state New World Order operation that has multiple objectives, multiple purposes. And while the big one of the invasion coming into America could be coupled with the geopolitical aspirations of those in Latin America, to include those in Mexico who wish to recover areas of the United States and reclaim it as part of theirs and renaming it Aztlan. Okay. Now the fact that Aztlan matches the Jade Helm map is not to be ignored. But it was a clue for me because you see, this would have been one of those objectives, carrots that Obama would have offered to those so like-minded, willing to participate in such an invasion. Because you see, it's not an invasion for the typical conventional war purposes. It's an invasion for gaining geography and holding it, necessary to gain concessions from the government in the process of holding not only the territory, but all of the people contained within the territory hostage until some determination is made. Now, it can go a lot of ways because it may not be that simple, but once it begins, no matter where it begins or when it begins, you have to at least have considered certain things. Now, okay, because like I stated, this invasion carries with it many different goals and or purposes. So I'm going to discuss some of them on top of the invasion, because the invasion is the cover, the means by which to do what I believe they're wanting to do. And while there are many things that they're going to do, I'm going to highlight the one area based on this Eagle Pass observation that forced me, because like I stated earlier, if you follow the road network systems on both the Mexican side and the U.S. side, you'll see that it leads, the roads always lead somewhere. Well, when I realized what was going on the Mexico side and realized how it come over the mountains, go around, if an invasion occurs on the West Coast, they would have a means by which to travel laterally to get to Texas based on these roads that exist on the Mexican side. But ultimately, when I viewed Eagle Pass going across the mountains, coming into the Baja California side, that's when I realized that an invasion from perhaps China, their forces would be along the West Coast and potentially could be here in the Baja Mexico area, in order to offload and begin a rapid mobile push across Mexico in order to allow them to meet up with Cuban and Russian forces in order to then push deep into the heart of America, central Texas, up through Tulsa, Oklahoma. Like I stated, I knew when I looked at the tip of the spear, Kansas, Fort Riley, Kansas, near Manhattan, Kansas, home to the Big Red One, the 1st Infantry Division. Now, that and this road network system, once again, is key because they're positioning their outer markers to be able to offer protection and cover for something that I believe would be going on within the invaded area. See, once they've acquired these goals in some way, shape, or form, This operation would have to be quick and dirty, very quick and very dirty. And by dirty, I mean they would have to be willingly wanting to kill anyone who impedes their plans, because they're on a time schedule. And the time schedule is very sensitive because of what they're trying to do under the cover of an invasion that's going to have troops and people being shot and killed and explosions and all the things that go with war. But within this operation of an invasion that has all of those elements ongoing would be a push for Austin. Now, Austin, as a reminder, I don't throw Austin in here just to have something to talk about. Austin has been on the burner for many, many, many reports. I've included it going all the way back to the North Korean invasion plans that listed Austin. Austin was specifically listed as part of the North Korean invasion plans, where the images shown in the North Korean big map room showed Austin to be marked on the map. Now, that's what got me to looking, and of course, over many years, I realized back in the day, 2015, they were still trying to, Texas was still trying to acquire its gold reserves, its gold bullion, from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve posed many hurdles. They delayed, they stalled, they made excuses. They offered Texas, we're willing to give you digital currency. But no, Texas wanted its physical gold. Now, they finally got it. The gold bullion is stored in Austin at a depository with regard to the University of Texas. The gold bullion reserves for Texas are there. Now, it's also the capital of Texas. But okay, Austin. You have to keep Austin in mind as an objective only because of the gold bullion. So, if Obama was to cut a deal with Latin American dictators to allow them to invade and get away with an invasion with him assisting, he would want something in the deal, in the bargain. What would he want, aside from all the other things that he could get from them, on the political stage? But because Obama is linked to Bush Sr., and because 12/1 kicked off the day after Bush Sr. was declared dead, the same date of the Alaskan earthquake, 7.0, 12/1. It's key and important to note that I believe the gold has been and has always been part of the plan, of which the invasion was going to provide a cover to do what they were going to do. Aside from all the warring things that are still, would be still done, the gold in Austin would be a prize, but it would have to be acquired by force. You would have to rapidly be able to go there, acquire it, and then do something with it. You have to take it somewhere. So, Cuban forces, primarily Cuban forces, along with Russian, perhaps Cuban and Latin American forces, such as Venezuela, Nicaragua, all these other countries that would go along to get along because they don't want to be defeated and annihilated. They would go along with a plan, but okay. Eagle Pass, aside from it being the crossing point for entry into the United States from Mexico, and aside from the major road networks that exist on both sides, it is a short run using the road network systems to run from Eagle Pass. Now, San Antonio, this is San Antonio. Every major city has these rings, these circles, that allows you to go around major cities, because major cities these days are too obstructive, too constrained. And for an enemy wanting to come through, well, that would be, you'd be sitting duck. You'd be like shooting ducks in a barrel. And so they want to be able to move rapidly and move around to get to Austin. And these outer markers provide the coverage, left, right, and center top, to allow them to do this operation here within Texas. This is why Texas is so important. It's why Texas has always been important. It's why Texas, from the very early stages of planning, was always marked as hostile. They had to have, you see, these markers, aside from being road markers for the road network systems, are also key in terms of boundary markers for an operation that puts Austin at the heart of this operation. And what's in Austin? The gold. So this invasion plan would hide the fact that they would want to conduct a more conventional robbery using military trained professionals to be the cover by which to come in. Now, the military, the Cuban, even Russian, Latin American forces would all be the cover, the troops necessary to provide the outer cover for an internal operation to rush, acquire the gold by whatever means, and then load it up by whatever means and move it. Now, moving it could be done by air, but you would have to have control of the airspace. So air assets is a consideration. If not air, then by ship, and you would have to have control of the area within the Gulf by which to do so. And if not by ship or air, then by road, moving it out of Texas into some other secret location where it can then later be dealt with. But the gold is the key to this. The gold. The geopolitical gains for Latin American types with reacquiring territory and states within the United States is a separate issue. That's for them. That's what they get out of it, and everything with it. Because, like I said, Pico Rivera is home to the B-2, the stealth bomber, the technology, the development, manufacturing. Tampa Bay is unique because of Special Operations Command headquartered there, MacDill Air Force Base, and that it's a bay that allows for access for various types of forces that could land that would then move in. And the MacDill Air Force Base, as I stated earlier, would be viable. You would want to use it if you're bringing in forces to use the airfield to land on, deploy, and then acquire and capture the key strategic points necessary to hold MacDill and the entire region captive. And once it's held captive, well, you see, they can't just come in all Rambo style, and they're not going to nuke it because, you know, they have to now be concerned with American citizens. And that's part of the design in this plan, to use the citizens, the populations in whatever cities, wherever they may be. And Livingston, I have to mention this again. There's a major water source here, but it's also a major road network system. And when you look at topography, the geography, the altitude of how high, you see, Texas becomes, at some point, and because this isn't, even though this operation internal might be a quick operation that needs to be conducted quickly, the rest of it is going to be around for a long, long time in order for it to become the political albatross that some leader or leaders are going to have to deal with. But it would be much easier to deal with if Trump weren't in office. Because if Pelosi or Hillary or someone like them are in office, then all the negotiations will go socialist. Oh yeah, you can go ahead and keep all of that, you know, and because that's what it was all about. Changing up America for them and implementing using Obama during 8 years to put into place executive orders and legislations and laws that made it easy for the president when the time came, which was supposed to be Hillary, to invoke, to round up the deplorables, to begin using the FEMA camps to start getting rid of anybody deemed useless. Now, let's get in. That's as much as I need to say with regard to the invasion plan, because it's specific to each and every one of you, depending on where you are. But El Paso is key only because it's located here, and across on the Mexican side is the ISIS camp. Those ISIS camps could be in numerous spots by now. But the road network system from El Paso running north takes you to Colorado. Now, here recently, if you've been keeping up with things, El Chapo, the Mexican drug lord, was found guilty on all 10 charges, sentenced to life in prison in a supermax security prison in Colorado, in Denver. So if you think for 1 second that an operation within an operation, first of all, let's get some things straight. The drug cartels are involved. The CIA is involved. Nation states and their militaries are involved. But the fact that the drug cartels are involved in the way they are for their own narco-trafficking reasons, human trafficking, and even though they're the henchmen for the CIA doing their bidding, the drug lords and the narco types all make billions of dollars because of their participation in allowing and supporting what's being done. So if you don't think, or if you don't think that the Mexican cartel and El Chapo's billions couldn't create an army within an invasion to head straight up to, once this kicks off, to invade across El Paso, take the road network system, push north into Denver, Colorado, and while there, who knows? Because you see, I've had to, when I thought about, well, could they try to make a prison escape for El Chapo? Well, it wouldn't come easy, but it's not impossible. Because once you're able to use military aircraft and missiles and artillery and things to blow things up that the existing drug cartels don't have, you see, working in combination, in coordination with the drug cartels, could indicate that there is a plan in place to, to take Denver Supermax prison and allow for El Chapo to be rescued from prison. Okay? Now, that's a far-fetched idea that I'm sure everyone's saying, oh, that could never happen, our security. Like I said, okay, police forces, yes, can respond, and if there's a bunch of people with shooting, yeah, they can get a bunch of police officers with sniper rifles and respond. But SWAT teams and police cars aren't going to stop tank rounds. And that's what I believe would have to be used in such operations, tank rounds or missiles fired from helicopters, Hellfire missile types that can destroy walls and do things. But you see, all of that would have to be planned. And so the El Chapo element is something I needed to discuss only because it's important that you understand it. It's possible. But from the invasion for me is all about the gold. Because this operation, this invasion plan, contains within it so many different motives, goals, and agendas as part of the invasion plan. There are political goals, there are military goals, there are personal, let's get the gold goals, and there's also perhaps goals of perhaps rescuing El Chapo. But one of the other things with regard to the drug cartel that's important to just note as part of this type of an operation is that the drug cartels, for the most part, they import their drugs, which is why they have tunnels and mules and carriers and the immigrants posing as immigrants who are really mules carrying drugs. And I believe that this type of an operation could also allow for a large scale, and bear with me here, a large scale bringing over of cocaine and all the heroin and all the various drugs in large volume so as to stockpile it on the American side with no longer the main concern of being able to get it across the border. Because if the border is truly reestablished, we're victorious and we reestablish our boundaries, our national boundaries, then all of their illegal products are going to be already on the American side. Large tonnage, volumes, so much so that what comes across the border would be minuscule compared to what's already in country being used and dispensed. And so the slow volume and or the impeded volume of drugs coming across the border would replenish what's already on the U.S. side in a much better way as opposed to the existing model where they have to bring it across, and if something happens, well, then all kinds of people are out money and, it delays and people are unhappy and people get killed and beheaded and shot and murdered. And so to fix that problem of making money and making sure the product represents money. That's all. So a plan within a plan would be to use this activity, this military incursion and invasion, this period of darkness that would come over America, because we would not know what's going on. And if we did, we would only know what we're being told. I'm certain we wouldn't know what's going on within the enemy territory of where the enemy is actually located. So why do I tell you all this? Because, for instance, if you're not into drones, perhaps you should be. There are drones out there as cheap as $100 or more that allows you to have a camera on the drone that allows you to see it either on your computer or your cell phone. And drones would be key for groups, militants working together to see what's coming, to see when it's happening. But then you would have to have a means of communicating that knowledge to someone else much further away. So drones, with their ability and their range, their flight time, the better ones have some amount of flight time. They have GPS, all kinds of things. But among the, among the military types, the militia types, you're going to have a system of being able to not only know what's going on, when it's going on, real time, but you're going to have a way to communicate what you're seeing real time to those who might need to know it. A means of broadcasting that visual image from drone to yourself, and then you passing it on through some other means. But all of that would be independent of a system that would be overtaken and overrun by the enemy. So if you're thinking the internet's going to be available, it might, you never know, but I doubt it, okay? I don't believe telephones, cell phones, so you're going to have some independent system. And lastly, I'm going to close out by saying, for all of you preppers, for those of you that think that, you've done your part to get ready for whatever might come, this is my challenge to you. Now, I live this life every day, so, I don't have to challenge myself. If I challenge myself, I would do without certain things that, go beyond survival. But try this on. If you think you're really ready, you've prepped, then this test requires 3 days, 72 hours, to prove or disprove, or to at least identify the deficiencies and problems with what you've done so far with your planning. 3 days. Now, what would you need to do? You would need to cut the water, cut the gas, cut the electricity, cut your internet use so that you don't have it. No water, no electricity, no gas, no heating, no television, nothing. Go 3 days. Include your family and see the issues that you're going to have. Now, 3 days, because people work and kids go to school and all of this, you're going to have to find a holiday and 3-day period by which to do so. But if you fail to do a 3-day test, if you refuse to do a 3-day test because you say, I'm ready, no. I think you're going to find out that if you truly test yourself for 3 days of without, you'll discover just how deficient your plans are, and how deficient as a group of people like-minded who want to do what's best for America. You got to survive before you can ever do something for America. If they're going to be able to kill you by merely cutting off modes of transportation and your ability to be resupplied with water and food and groceries, once they cut electricity and power and gas and all the things that you rely on every day, once those things are gone, your whole mindset's going to change, and so will your neighbors. Because you see, it's one thing to test yourself, but when the test is live and ongoing for everyone, that's why within 72 hours, the zombies will start walking around, the people who didn't prep, wanting, have you got any spare food? Me and my family. And the moment you become benevolent and share with them, they're going to know you've got enough to share, and you're never going to get rid of them. And if you say no, because you want to have enough for your own family and your children and yourself, then there comes a point as to how much will you do, because you know they're going to come back, and they may come back with others who they tell he's got food, but he wouldn't give it. So let's go take it. That's when you're going to have to be ready and be prepared to deal with your neighbors in a way that will come first, long before you ever deal with the enemy and enemy soldiers coming across your lawn, or airborne troops landing in your fields. You're going to have to deal with your neighbors first. So if you're not prepared for that, how to prepare? Deal with with a test. 3 days. If you can't conduct a 3-day test of your survivability without nothing, because you're going to have to learn how to flush a toilet, how to heat water, how to start a fire. I mean, you're going to all kinds of things, let alone all the stuff that's in your freezer. Well, if you keep your freezer shut for 3 days, it'll probably make it. But anything after that, you're going to have to pull it all out and prepare it for long-term eatability. You're going to have to cook your meats, dry them out, make them into jerky, or do whatever you can do. But you see, all those are individual lessons that each and every one of you are going to be challenged with on your own. I know what I have to do. I know what I'm capable of doing and how much I'm not capable of doing. So I'm not deluding myself by thinking that I'm prepared, because I am only prepared to a certain given point. And when those other parameters come into play, such as the walking zombies who did nothing and prepared for nothing, when they become the problem, that's when you're going to have a whole different world, a whole different reality to deal with. Because shooting and killing people who want to kill you to take what you have is what's going to be faced. What's going to be facing all of those people who have prepared. And if you've told everybody how much you've prepared for and all this, well, then you just, you're going to be victimized. So I've said what I've said in order to try to paint a picture of where it could lead, all under the guise of an invasion USA that was planned for by Obama, Castro, Cuba, perhaps Venezuela, Nicaragua, Mexico, other Latin American, Central American nation states, all who want a piece of the pie and are willing to take it in order to get it. All the while, the deep staters use this as a means by which to change up America and acquire the gold that's in Austin. Now, that's what I wanted to say. Until next time, I'm aware of all the things going on with Trump getting ready to declare a national emergency. And I believe it's because of this invasion that's still ongoing. They still want to conduct this plan. So things I'm seeing Trump doing, I see him doing it because of this consideration. Keep that in mind as you see what Trump does. So until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye.